Argentina's official statistics agency estimates that citizens hold more than $270 billion outside the formal financial system. Let that number sink in for a moment. $270 billion. That's more than 5 times the reserves held by Argentina's central bank. That's roughly half the country's entire GDP, and almost none of it exists in any bank account, any official ledger, any government database. It's stuffed under mattresses, hidden in walls, locked in private safety deposit boxes and underground vaults scattered across Buenos Aires, sitting in offshore accounts from Miami to Switzerland to the Cayman Islands, buried in real estate, purchased with suitcases full of $100 bills. Argentines have a name for this money. They call it dólares del colchón, mattress doles, and the practice of hoarding them isn't a quirk or a cultural oddity. It's a survival mechanism forged through decades of hyperinflation, currency collapses, government betrayals, and outright theft by the state. This is the untold story of how 45 million people built a parallel economy larger than the GDP of most countries, not because they wanted to evade the system, but because the system left them no choice. The official numbers only hint at the scale of what's happening. According to the OECD's 2025 economic survey, approximately 50% of employment in Argentina exists within the informal sector, half the workforce operating outside tax rules, labor protections, and official documentation. World Economics estimates the informal economy at roughly 30% of total economic output, but these figures capture only employment-based informality, people working off the books, businesses operating without registration. The true scope becomes apparent when you examine hidden assets. A landmark 2016 tax amnesty revealed what economists had long suspected. When given the opportunity to disclose hidden wealth with reduced penalties, Argentines came forward with assets worth 21% of the country's entire GDP. Over 80% of these assets had been concealed offshore. The wealthy weren't just evading taxes, they had moved their fortunes out of the country entirely. So how did an entire nation learn to distrust its own currency so completely that hiding dollars became a way of life? The answer lies in a series of economic traumas, so severe they rewired the Argentine psyche permanently. Between 1975 and 1988, inflation in Argentina averaged 10% per month, not per year per month. That translates to roughly 220% annually, sustained for over a decade. Prices didn't creep upward, they lurched. Workers would receive their paychecks and immediately rush to spend them because waiting even a few days meant watching their money evaporate. But what happened in 1989 crossed from economic crises into something approaching civilizational breakdown. In July 1989, monthly inflation hit 200%. For a single month, by the end of that year, annual inflation reached approximately 5,000%. Try to imagine what that means in practical terms. A loaf of bread that costs 1 peso on Monday costs 2 pesos by Wednesday. By Friday, it's 4 pesos. By the following Monday, 8. Your life savings, accumulated over decades of work, becomes worthless in weeks. The psychological impact of watching money die of understanding viscerally that currency is just paper and promises that never leaves you. Several stabilization attempts failed during this period. The Primavera Plan of August 1988, the BB Plan of July 1989. Each promise of stability, each new economic program ended in failure. Each failure drove another lesson deeper into the national consciousness. The peso cannot be trusted. The only safe haven is the US dollar. But here's where the story takes its cruelest turn. In April 1991, Argentina launched what seemed like a miracle solution. The Comfortability Plan. The government pegged the peso to the US dollar at a perfect 1-to-1 ratio. 1 peso equaled $1. Guaranteed by law. For nearly a decade, it appeared to work beautifully. Inflation dropped to single digits. The economy grew. Imports became affordable. Middle-class Argentines traveled abroad, bought foreign goods, and began to believe that their country had finally escaped its monetary curse. Day e adente. The government was spending far more than it collected in taxes, while desperately maintaining the fixed exchange rate. By the late 1990s, the contradictions became unsustainable. And when the system finally broke, it broke catastrophically. In November 2001, Argentines sensed what was coming. They began withdrawing dollars from their bank accounts, converting pesos, sending money abroad. A classic bank run was underway. The government's response, announced on December 2, 2001, would become one of the most infamous acts of financial betrayal in modern history. They called it the Carralito. The little Carralito. The playpen. Cash withdrawals were limited to just $250 to $300 per week. Your money was in the bank. You could see it on your statement, but you couldn't touch it. What followed was worse. In late December, the newly appointed president defaulted on nearly $93 billion in Argentine debt. Then, in January 2002, the government abandoned the convertibility system and did something unthinkable. They forcibly converted all dollar-denominated bank accounts into pesos. Argentines who had saved in dollars who had trusted the banking system with their life savings in the world. As reserve currency, watched the government convert those dollars to pesos. At 1.4 to 1, when the market was allowed to set the exchange rate, the peso collapsed to 4 to 1. Do the math. If you had $100,000 in a dollar account, the government converted it to 140,000 pesos. Those pesos were now worth $35,000 at market rates. You lost 65% of your life savings overnight. Not through market forces or bad investments, but through government decree. Your money was stolen by your own government using nothing but a pen and a law. The immediate aftermath looked like the end of civilization. Poverty in Greater Buenos Aires reached 50%. Unemployment exceeded 30%. People scavenged through garbage for food. In one incident that captured the desperation of the moment, a truck carrying live cattle overturned on a highway outside Rosario. Local residents descended on the crash site and stripped every ounce of flesh from 22 animals within hours. This was Argentina in 2002. Now ask yourself, if your government had done this to you, if they had literally reached into your bank account and taken 65% of everything you owned, would you ever trust them again? Would you ever put your savings in their banks again? Would you ever hold their currency a moment longer than absolutely necessary? The answer, for 45 million Argentines, was no, never again. From that moment forward, the mattress became safer than the bank. The dollar became the only real money, and an entire parallel economy emerged to serve people who had learned, through the most painful lesson imaginable, that the official system existed to rob them. The most visible manifestation of this parallel economy unfolds every day on Cale, Florida, a pedestrian shopping street in downtown Buenos Aires. Walk down this thoroughfare as a tourist, and you'll hear a constant refrain, cambio. The people calling out are known as arbolitos, little trees named for how they stand rooted in place, arms waving like branches, beckoning pursuit. These street-level operators are just the surface. They are the storefront of a vast underground financial system. An arbolito who catches your interest will lead you into an alleyway, an office building, a shop that appears to sell antiques or travel services but actually exists to exchange currency. Even legally operating exchange houses often maintain parallel illegal operations. The practice is so normalized that tourists openly discuss which arbolitos offer the best rates. But the arbolitos are small time. The real action happens in what Argentines call the cuevas, or the caves. These are sophisticated informal exchange houses that range from small storefronts to massive international operations spanning multiple countries. The most notorious case reveals just how large these operations can grow. In October 2023, Argentine authorities raided the Nimbus Group, one of Buenos Aires' largest illegal currency operations. The man behind it was Ivo Esteban Ronica, known as the Croatian or the King of the Cuevas. What investigators found wasn't a back-alley money-changing operation, it was a multinational financial enterprise. Ronica's network extended to the United States, where he allegedly operated offshore account opening services. It reached into Spain, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Bolivia. Inside the raided premises, officers discovered a large office filled with desks, computers, and workstations. They found detailed notes itemizing foreign exchange transactions, banknote counting machines, empty bags of various sizes, paper shredders overflowing with destroyed documents, and, perhaps most tellingly, they found Goedel's special garments designed for strapping bundles of currency notes onto the body for transport. One front company, Tower Travel, allegedly served as a mechanism to transfer dollars abroad through what Buenos Aires insiders call a financial loop, a system generating approximately 20% profit in dollars on each transaction. This was an amateur hour. This was international finance, just operating entirely outside the law. Why does this parallel currency market exist at all? The answer lies in government restrictions that make the official system unusable. When banks limit citizens to purchasing just $100 in dollars per month, they did in 2023, where does the remaining demand go? It goes underground. The blue dollar rate, as Argentines call the unofficial exchange rate, reflects genuine supply and demand. When official access is restricted, the blue rate rises to 2, sometimes 3 times the official rate. This creates absurd situations. In 2023. An Argentine withdrawing money from an ATM at the official rate would immediately lose half its value, because those same dollars could fetch twice as many pesos on the blue market. The rational response was obvious. Never use official channels. Always go to the cuevas. The system occupies a peculiar legal gray zone. Cuevas are technically illegal, operating without authorization. Yet they're simultaneously tolerated, widely used, and rarely prosecuted except in spectacular cases involving money laundering or drug trafficking. This tolerance reflects pragmatic reality. If authorities shut down every cueva, they would eliminate a pressure valve that makes Argentina's dysfunctional monetary system barely functional. People need dollars. If they can't get them legally, they'll get them illegally. Aggressive enforcement wouldn't eliminate demand, it would just drive operations deeper underground and increase criminal involvement. But here's where Argentina's underground economy becomes truly remarkable. The parallel currency market is just one piece. The most distinctive feature of Argentina's shadow economy reveals itself when someone tries to buy property. Imagine you want to purchase an apartment in Buenos Aires. You've found the perfect place. You've negotiated a price. Now it's time to close the deal. In most countries, you'd arrange a wire transfer, perhaps take out a mortgage, sign some documents at a title company. In Argentina, you show up with a suitcase full of cash. This is not an exaggeration. This is not a figure of speech. Virtually all real estate transactions in Argentina are conducted in physical US dollar bills, paid in cash. When an Argentino or foreigner purchases property, they physically appear at closing with bags or briefcases containing stacks of $100 bills. The buyer and seller, often accompanied by their accountants and lawyers, count the money together. The transaction concludes with a handshake over piles of American currency. Multiple sources confirm this extraordinary practice. Real estate agents state that approximately 99% of property sales follow this pattern. The Buenos Aires real estate market is exclusively priced in US dollars, with most transactions paid in cash and in full, because there are virtually no mortgages available. The country lacks the financial infrastructure for long-term lending at stable rates. Why does cash dominate? Several factors converge. First, Argentina has no functioning mortgage market. Decades of inflation and financial instability made 30-year fixed-rate loans impossible. Without mortgages, buyers must pay in full. Second, cash transactions offer privacy. The parties to a real estate deal need not involve banks, credit checks, or extensive documentation. For those with undeclared dollars, and there are hundreds of billions of such dollars, this discretion is essential. Third, and most importantly, historical experience taught Argentines that money in banks can be money in real estate cannot be pacified overnight. Bricks and mortars cannot be devalued by government decree. During 2024, Buenos Aires alone saw 54,761 property transactions, up over 35% from the previous year. Even a fraction of these deals, conducted at prices typically ranging from $100,000 to several $1 million, represents an almost incomprehensible volume of physical cash changing hands. But who exactly is operating in this underground economy? The answer reveals two distinct worlds existing in parallel. For roughly 42 to 50% of Argentine workers employed informally, the underground economy isn't a choice. It's a trap. These workers lack formal registration, pay no taxes, and receive no protections. The consequences are severe. Informal workers earn nearly 60% less than their formal counterparts. They have no health insurance, no pension contributions, no unemployment protection, no enforceable labor rights. Informality concentrates among older workers, those with less education, and in sectors like domestic work, construction, agriculture, and retail. For these Argentines, the underground economy means vulnerability, not protection. The picture looks completely different for the wealthy. Research analyzing Argentina S2016 tax amnesty revealed that offshore tax evasion concentrates heavily among the wealthiest 0.1% of adults. When given the chance to disclose hidden assets, this tiny elite came forward with fortunes representing over 20% of Argentina's, and more than 80% of these assets had been hidden abroad. For wealthy Argentines, the underground economy offers sophisticated preservation mechanisms far beyond mattress dollars. Offshore accounts, foreign real estate, precious metals, cryptocurrency. Their logic is straightforward. Argentina's taxes on wealth are high. Enforcement has historically been weak. The government has repeatedly demonstrated willingness to confiscate assets through devaluation or direct seizure. Preserving wealth requires moving it beyond the government's reach. Capital flight from Argentina follows predictable patterns. During periods of crisis or anticipated devaluation, The wealthy convert pesos to dollars and transfer those dollars abroad. This happens through banking channels when available, through cuevas when not, or through direct physical transport of cash. Historical analysis shows capital flight and consumer confidence moving in opposite directions. When confidence collapses, capital flees. Those who moved quickly during the 2001 crisis preserved their wealth. Those who trusted the system lost everything. This creates a permanent state of alertness among wealthy Argentines. At the first sign of instability, the response is immediate. Convert to dollars, move offshore, ask questions later. What does all this mean for Argentina as a nation? The consequences are profound and self-reinforcing. The underground economy creates a vicious fiscal trap. Because so much activity occurs outside the tax system, the government cannot collect sufficient revenue to fund basic services. This forces either deficit spending, which leads to money printing and inflation, or cuts to services that push more people into informality. With 30% of economic activity informal and the wealthiest citizens evading taxes offshore, the tax base that should support 45 million people is dramatically smaller than it should be. The government must then raise rates on the formal sector, creating incentives for even more activity to move underground. A spiral with no exit. The underground economy distorts competition. A business operating informally enjoys cost advantages from non-compliance with tax and labor laws. It can price products below formal competitors while maintaining margins. This punishes compliance. Formal businesses that follow the rules face higher costs than informal competitors. Over time, this creates pressure to either join the informal sector or shut down entirely. The underground economy fragments society. Those with access to dollars enjoy protection from peso devaluation. Those without bear the full burden of inflation. This division maps onto class lines. Wealthier Argentines accumulate substantial dollar savings. Poorer Argentines, living paycheck to paycheck in pesos, cannot convert enough to matter. When inflation spikes, the poor suffer most. Argentina stands as a puzzle in development economics. It began the 20th century as one of the world's wealthiest nations, with income levels comparable to France and Germany. A century later, it remains an emerging market with recurring crises. The persistence of its underground economy partly explains this trajectory. An economy where half the activity occurs informally cannot generate tax revenue for infrastructure, education, and development. It cannot build the institutional trust required for deep capital markets and long-term investment. Now, a new chapter is being written. In December 2023, Javier Milei assumed Argentina's presidency, promising radical transformation. His administration has pursued aggressive budget cuts and monetary tightening. In May 2025, the government announced measures eliminating tax reporting requirements for citizens spending previously undeclared dollars on everyday transactions. Property buyers and notaries would no longer need to report transactions to tax authorities. Banks would be prohibited from requesting clients' tax records during account opening. The presidential spokesperson articulated the philosophy: this is how we reached a catastrophic outcome in which 50% of our economy ended up being informal, and the state, like Big Brother, controlled all of its citizens' transactions. As if they were criminals deserving of punishment. Economy Minister Luis Caputo reinforced this framing with remarkable candor. Those who do this are not criminals. They are the vast majority of Argentines who have been abused by excessive taxes and controls. Will it work? Will Argentines finally trust their institutions enough to bring $270 billion in hidden dollars back into the light? History provides little cause for optimism. Previous governments offered amnesties and promised stability, only to impose new controls, new taxes, or outright confiscation when circumstances changed. Why would any rational Argentine believe this time is different? The very features that make the underground economy, functional anonymity, protection from government interference, dollar-denominated value preservation, would be lost by returning to the formal system. Even if current policies appear favorable, future governments could reverse course. Some economists view these initiatives skeptically from another angle. The government's goal may be less about formalizing the economy than about accessing dollars to manage capital flows. Critics have been more direct, describing relaxed reporting requirements as sounding like an invitation not to pay taxes. Anti-money laundering experts warn that higher thresholds for reporting cash deposits create opportunities for criminals to legitimize illicit funds alongside ordinary mattress dollars. Argentina's underground economy fundamentally depends on the US dollar, the blue dollar market, mattress savings, real estate transactions, offshore wealth all center on American currency. Argentines aren't hiding pesos or converting to euros. They're accumulating dollars. This creates a peculiar dependency. Argentina's parallel economy functions only because the dollar provides a stable store of value. Some analysts argue that Argentina has already been dollarized in practice, even without formal adoption. Prices for major purchases are denominated in dollars. Savings are held in dollars. The peso functions primarily as a transaction medium for daily expenses. An evasion. People convert $2 as quickly as possible. $270 billion hidden from the banking system. 50% of the workforce operating informally. Real estate transactions conducted in physical cash. A parallel currency market operating in plain sight. Tax evasion so extensive that a single amnesty revealed hidden assets worth 1/5 of GDP. This is not a bug in the system. This is the system. After decades of hyperinflation, currency collapses, defaults, and confiscation, Argentines built parallel structures that function regardless of what the government does. The mattress dollars represent rational self-insurance against institutional failure. The blue dollar market provides currency access that official channels deny. Cash real estate transactions offer asset preservation beyond government reach. Offshore accounts protect against the next confiscation. Each adaptation carries costs. Informal workers lack protection. Tax evasion starves public services. Capital flight prevents domestic investment. The economy underperforms its potential, but from the individual Argentine's perspective, these costs are preferable to the alternative. Trusting institutions that have betrayed that trust over and over again. The untold story of Argentina's underground economy is ultimately a story about trust, its destruction, and the extraordinary lengths people will go to protect themselves once it has gone. Every dollar stuffed in a mattress, every transaction at a cueva, every real estate closing conducted with suitcases of cash carries the same message. We remember what you did in 2001. We remember every devaluation and every broken promise, and we will not let you do it again. Until Argentina achieves genuine, sustained monetary stability measured not in months or years, but in generations, the underground economy will persist. $270 billion represents not criminality, but collective memory. It represents a nation that learned, through the cruelest possible lessons, that the only person you can trust with your money is yourself. And so they hide it in mattresses, in walls, in safety deposit boxes, in foreign accounts, in apartments purchased with cash. They hide it anywhere the government cannot reach. They hide it because history taught them that someday, inevitably, the government will try to take it again. That's the untold story of Argentina's underground economy, not a tale of tax cheats and money launderers. Though those exist too, it's a tale of survival, of adaptation. Of 45 million people who built an entire shadow financial system because the official one failed them so completely, so repeatedly, and so catastrophically that operating outside it became the only rational choice. The question isn't why Argentines hide their money. The question is why anyone would expect them to do anything else.